Good afternoon, everyone. I'm not sure that I'm going to do any dancing, but what I will say is that since it's after lunch, you do have permission to sleep, but not to snore. That's out the way. So I'd like to congratulate once again our very distinguished chair and co-chair. And welcome and greet my fellow panelists, colleagues who are online, colleagues who are in the room. I think throughout the day we've had so many presentations focusing on different aspects of intercultural competencies, intercultural dialogue, which is something that's aligned. So what I am going to do is highlight two separate areas that IEP has worked on, firstly with UNESCO and then separately as a result of our other research work as an institute. So very briefly, I will race through this. The IEP is an international think tank, and what we do is we develop data to demonstrate the economic benefit of peace and the other benefits that it brings. We have a small but hopefully significant global presence. And our main work is what's in the top right corner there, which is the Global Peace Index, where we rank countries according to their relative levels of peace. We also do the Global Terrorism Index, the Ecological Threat Report, which looks at what people like to call climate change issues in relation to peace. We do systems thinking, and we have several other books and newsletters and so on. We are headquartered in Sydney, Australia, and then I am based at the Harare office, which is soon to move to Nairobi, which is the regional headquarters for sub-Saharan Africa. Now, I thought I would highlight this slide, which is one from our very recently released Global Peace Index. And it highlights that 84 countries became more peaceful in the world and 79 countries deteriorated. And what I wanted to highlight is what drove the deteriorations, which is external conflicts fought, political instability, and deaths from internal conflict. And I think immediately you can see one of the scenarios or one of the platforms where intercultural competencies, where intercultural dialogue could really have an impact, which is the political instability. I think we spoke about this earlier, which is the economic impact of violence in the world, where 17.5 trillion is what the cost is. And then just for interest's sake, this is how the cost breaks down. Again, this is just for you to look at later, and I think I'll share the slides with the team so that you can have that and our other work as well, which is available on our website. So the UNESCO initiative for enabling intercultural dialogue is something that we collaborated on and released together with UNESCO, and I think has brought us all here today. I think my colleague, Tubert, shared on it very, very briefly in the morning. The quote on the screen is by a military serviceman in Colombia, where, and as I'm sure you know, there are issues with FARC, very entrenched violence, very severe consequences of that violence. And he says, in this war, we're taught to have enemies. And here, by here, he means the football field. We are reminded that enemies have families and problems too. And I think this is something that powerfully demonstrates the impact that the application of intercultural dialogue can have in a community, where before you were shooting at each other, but now you're able to appreciate that this person who until very recently we were trying to end each other's lives, we are pretty much the same. They have problems like I have problems. They're a person like I'm a person. So just some data points that came out of the report we did. 1.5 billion people live in countries with low levels of intercultural dialogue. 69% of terrorist attacks globally occur in countries where there are low levels of intercultural dialogue. That's for 2019. 89% of all current conflicts are occurring in countries with low intercultural dialogue. 91% of refugees in 2020 were from countries where there's low intercultural dialogue. 30% of people in countries with low intercultural dialogue live in absolute poverty. And I think another stat that's not there but is vitally important is that countries where there's low ICD score 77% lower in terms of gender inclusion, which again demonstrates what we're missing out on, and what could be changed if we apply this one single approach to handling things. So the initiative, together with IEP and UNESCO, covered the elements that you see. Conceptual and technical architecture, which will cover the UNESCO framework for enabling intercultural dialogue, which will also cover, we'll look a little bit less at the analytical report, and I think the dialogue support facility is something that is in the future. So that is a definition, and I think I'll skip through this. And this slide, if you take a look, it highlights how it occurs. It highlights the importance of both verbal and non-verbal aspects, that it can be in person, and as COVID so boldly demonstrated, it can also be virtual. It can occur between individuals or between groups. So again, that is something that is wonderful and versatile about it. It can also occur at local, national, and international levels. So that is, again, something else to pay attention to, so that the benefits are realized at all those levels. Otherwise, you have these glaring gaps which make things perhaps a bit more complicated. Now, what can intercultural dialogue do? It can catalyze action against and to address the root causes of violence and conflict. And I think this is where we've been moving, not just as academics, but as practitioners, to say you need to look not just at the symptoms, but at the root causes of conflict, violence, inequality, and all the other things. It can change mindsets. It can mobilize a diverse range of actors and help them invest in actions. So very briefly, again, I will skip through this, but what this is that it outlines the structural domains which operate at a macro level, which is the very high national, regional, international level, and then the supporting domains which play out on a more local level. So on a local level, you'll see your inclusion and representation, you'll see your leadership, and organization, you'll see linkages and coherency, and then lastly skills and values. And then that is how it all comes together, where on the left you have the supporting domains we stated, and then around them you have the structural domains playing out in the 5 platforms that you see in the center. So media and ICT is one platform or arena, education, culture and the arts, politics and political negotiation, and then local governance and urban planning, which can all benefit from that. Something else that I think I alluded to just before lunch is the scores or the measurement for Africa, and there it is where you see that social cohesion and freedom of expression were the 2 areas where, as a continent, we performed very well. However, governance and citizenship, and then skills and values were less high in terms of their scoring. So looking ahead, as I said, following the launch of the UNESCO framework, we need to talk. UNESCO hopes to grow ICD with a dialogue support facility, which we will all participate in and hopefully collaborate with the chair moving forward. There is a series of pilots that are currently planned. I know that one of them is in Somalia and several others around the world, and hopefully these will yield very strong results and be spread out across the world. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is positive peace. I think immediately you'll be thinking to yourselves, what is this thing called positive peace, and why is it uniquely different from peace? So ordinarily, if you were asked to ask someone what is peace, they would say it is the absence of violence, it is the absence of war, it is the absence of crime and fighting and things like that. However, peace is also the presence of certain things, and it is the presence of attitudes, institutions, and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. And how we came about this positive peace framework is by looking at the data from the Global Peace Index, from the Global Terrorism Index, and asking ourselves, what is present in peaceful countries and what is absent in countries where there's no peace and development. And it comes out to these 8 factors, which we call the 8 pillars of positive peace, and that create the optimal environment for human potential to flourish. The first is a well-functioning government. And this looks at issues to do with service delivery, most critically, because this is the first role of government, service delivery, whether it's at a central level or at a very local level. It looks at issues to do with the quality of laws and policies and the rule of law, and then it looks at issues to do with participatory democracy. The second pillar of peace is equitable distribution of resources. And here we're talking about, does everyone have an opportunity to get ahead in life? It can be looking at things like education. It can be looking at things like health. It can be looking at different things. And are these distributed well geographically? The difference between urban and rural, for example, across different religious groups, socioeconomic groups, racial groups, and political groups, and so on and so forth. The next pillar of peace is the free flow of information, and this looks at, obviously, do people have phones? Do people have libraries? It looks at issues to do with fake news. What's the quality of the information that's going around? And then it looks at issues of access as well. Is it affordable? Is it available to everyone? Are there barriers? Good relations with neighbors is another vital pillar of peace. And this looks at a national level, issues to do with tourism, cross-border and foreign direct investment. It looks at issues to do with war across borders. But at a local level, are we able to relate one to another as human beings every day? The next pillar of peace is high levels of human capital, your education, your health, and your skills, which are vital. Acceptance of the rights of others, which looks at human rights issues. Low levels of corruption, which has a tremendous impact on whether or not there's violence in a community. And then finally, a sound business environment. Quite simply put, when there's no jobs, your young people go into crime, your young people go into terrorism, and so on. So these 8 pillars are what we call the 8 pillars of peace. And what they bring in a very real way are things like improved incomes, things like improved inclusion, where people can participate more actively. High levels of well-being, again, is something that's important. High levels of resilience. Earlier, we were talking about the SDGs, Agenda 2063, and so on. Positive peace yields better performance scores on national development plans and the SDGs as well. So by bringing this to room, what we're hoping to achieve is where we have these islands or these systems of positive peace, where in a community you build the positive peace. You create those factors that build resilience, that promote human flourishing, that promote development. And then you stack them up, and then at a country, you have many systems of positive peace. And then you multiply those benefits to the world where the benefits started by small actions at a very local level accrue to a world that is more peaceful. So yes, thank you very much. Let's keep talking, and we will hear questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.